Hello everyone, and thanks for joining our First Thought Leadership webinar session, Adding Value During a Crisis for Kinder to 12 Education. My name is Liala, and I will be your host today. We do have a lot to cover, so before we hear from our key speakers, Rich Nedwich and Eric Heinrich, I would just want to cover off some additional information. You will see that there is a Q&A icon on your screen, where if you have any questions during this session, we ask that you submit them via the tool so that we can cover them all off at the end of the session. Secondly, we will be giving away 25 US dollar Amazon gift vouchers during the event. However, to be eligible and qualify, you will need to attend this whole webinar session as well as complete the event survey, which will be sent out after this webinar for your chance to win. So we will contact all the winners individually mid-next week. So again, thanks for joining us today. And now I will hand this over to our educational experts at CommScope, Rich Nedwich and Eric Heinrich.
Hello, welcome everyone. This is Rich Nedwich. I'm the Director of Education at CommScope, and I'm glad to be here with my good friend Eric Heinrich. Eric, you want to say hi?
Yes, hi everybody, and thanks for joining. Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, depending on where you live.
So good evening from California as we kick off this webinar here. Just a brief introduction of sorts. So Eric and I have come from the Ruckus portfolio, or the Ruckus business unit, as we call it, acquired into CommScope not that long ago. And so we come at this from a perspective or discussion today from the wireless perspective, maybe more so, but now as part of CommScope, a much broader purview, a much broader view of what can be done to address the needs of our customers. So this little fact tile sheet is just to let you know that we're now much broader, much bigger than what we used to be. So while we're still Ruckus, we are part of a much larger and more capable organization to support all your needs. And I'll touch on what we think some of those needs are in just a minute as we go. I mean, we have folks all over the globe of all different stripes and different competencies and capabilities, not just in Americas, but in Asia Pacific and everywhere. And very happy to be part of this larger team here to help you. Now, it's a bit overwhelming for us, for some of our partners, some of our customers, of just how many different things there are to know and what can be done. And I'll talk a little bit about this and how it all ties together to this whole webinar topic today. CommScope, we say we unlock your network's full potential. There's three pillars to what CommScope communication networks can do. One is residential broadband delivery through the ARIS acquisition. So a lot of components for delivering network core, access, and edge to the home. ARIS was number one in broadband, residential broadband delivery to the home. In the middle is venue, and really this is the buildings, like a smart city, a community, intelligent buildings, schools, universities, etc. And all different types of ways of connecting within and between these different types of venues. And then third is macro cellular. These are antenna systems, 5G, CBRS, internal building wireless, small cell solutions, campus switching, etc. So it's a large variety of things, whether it's macro metro connectivity, whether it's buildings and between buildings, or whether it's to the home. What does this mean for K-12 or primary secondary education, which is really why we're here today? Well, number one, we're home, right? So if nothing else, this global pandemic we find ourselves in has forced most schools to close, and Eric is going to touch on some statistics on that. And so there is a need to be connected from home. I'll be perfectly honest with you all, I'm delivering this webinar from home, and I expect many of you are listening to it from your homes, right? So reliable broadband delivery in the home is important, right? Of course, we can connect to venues like schools. So when the students are back in school, hopefully you guys are starting your school sessions this week, and you're having some kids come in and they're on their devices and they're sitting in their classrooms and they're connected and having reliable connectivity for digital learning. But for the times when they're not in school and they need to be connected, there is a need to connect them in the community, right? And so we have the ability to provide connectivity to the community, as it says here, services to plan, design, implement, and operate networks in all these segments. So Eric and I presented this webinar and a bunch of the solutions you'll see here to our channel reseller partners in the States a couple of weeks ago, and it had a pretty decent response. We were pleasantly surprised, and so we've been asked to help, help provide the same kind of information, maybe a little bit different, for our end user customers and other folks who are interested in implementing these types of connectivity solutions in their primary, secondary schools, not just in the U.S., but at the behest of our team, we're happy to be here today to bring this material and hopefully make it relevant for you in the Asia Pacific region as well. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Eric to take it forward on what he's seeing on the trends in the market.
Great, and thank you very much, Rich, and thank you all for joining us. We are pretty excited about what we have to offer and have to share with you. And hopefully you'll find something. If this is not your specific area that you're looking for, hopefully it will still spur some thinking in how you can participate, because as we'll show you, it takes more than just one group to focus on solving some of these really big challenges. But I'm going to jump in. I would like to provide a little bit of context. We've all been the whole world has been dealing with the impacts of the coronavirus, and I thought I would simply put some numbers up to show the context around how much of an impact it has been. Clearly, what we see here on the lower left, you see these lines, these trend lines. And while the number of daily new cases continues to grow around the world, interestingly enough, the number of daily deaths is declining. And that's a very positive look at what is happening. But as you can see, it's impacted everywhere. If you look at this map here of the confirmed cases in Asia, there is not really an area that hasn't been impacted that reports information, right? That where that information is available, we know that there are impacts worldwide. But with that trend declining, we also are starting to see some changes happening, thankfully, that we've all been waiting for. Not just have the impacts been on us and our families, but it has directly impacted education. And this is part of what we wanted to dive into a little more deeply today. By the end of March, almost 1.4 billion students around the world were impacted by coronavirus and the stay-at-home and school closures that we started to see. Now, this includes everything from early education through postgraduate. So this is all levels of education, but as you can see, it has a tremendous impact on teaching and learning across the world. That 1.4 billion students back in March totaled 80% approximately of the global enrolled learners. So 80% of people who were in school for learning were impacted by this coronavirus. Bringing this directly to Asia, what we see is in pink, those are the countries that had localized closures, or rather were closing in some areas, but not quite all. It was left at the discretion of the local communities based on how bad the impacts of coronavirus were. In the lighter purple, those are countrywide. Those countries decided that nationally they were going to close. The ministries of education were making decisions that they would close schools around the country. And only those few in blue remained open. So you can see that the impact was very dramatic across Asia in particular. And so let's take a little bit deeper look here. As we saw that trend line of the declining number of deaths and the impacts in Asia, where we saw some of the impacts at the earliest stages and the impact being declining, we start to see different approaches as schools start to try to reopen. If you have children at home like I do, many of us in the U.S. are looking forward to the day when students will return back to school and life can go back to normal. But I thought it was interesting to look at how a few different countries were approaching this. In particular, in Australia, we saw that in South Wales, they opened completely, attempting to reopen as much as normal with a full reopening. In India, we saw that there is an announcement that schools will open in July. However, there's been a recommendation that that is with only 30% attendance and that younger students will stay home. So it's a phased approach where only in certain areas those students will be returning, but not in all areas. They have the zones. The orange and green zones will go first, and students till class 8 won't be attending school at the beginning, and classes would begin with that partial enrollment. That's going to be very difficult, but the idea is in order to enable fewer students in one place at a time, and we'll look at that in some detail. And then finally, in the Philippines, for example, they're stating that they would not reopen until there was a vaccine, and we don't know how far off that may be. So there is an entire range of responses that we're seeing. Different countries are going to have a different approach. However, there are some themes. As an example, I wanted to share what we're experiencing here in the United States. In the States, we saw schools closing around March 16th, and that impacted over 124,000 schools. That meant about 55.1 million students alone here in the United States. Now, if you look at the chart on the upper right-hand side, this was a survey presented to superintendents. These are the leaders of these particular schools. And asking them what were their leading concerns. What are the top of mind? And it was interesting to see that the number one thing that was responded on the left, the large red bar, is cleaning. Not much of a surprise. Masks, cleaning the school, these were the top of mind things because these are not things that they were normally prepared to do. These are new processes. And they know that this is the area of greatest risk. If there is a health problem, they most likely will have to shut down again, as we saw in South Korea when they went to reopen. But we see that also there are some other challenges with transportation. They don't want to have too many people or too many kids too closely together. So if we look down below that at some of the strategies that they're taking, I thought this was interesting. I've marked several with a blue arrow. I won't cover all of them, but the large orange bar, the first one is staggering schedules. But again, this is in order to have fewer students. The yellow bar points out to reduce class sizes. Again, the idea is not having too many students too close to one another. That second blue line then goes down the list to say, offer online learning options. Again, we saw this worldwide. This is an option where it's possible. Connecting students for distance learning with the online learning options. Following down to the very end, increasing that outdoor time. Outdoor learning when it's possible, where the weather permits. That again provides more space, more airflow, lower chances of catching something. One thing to note that I found very interesting, there was a letter published and a number of superintendents signed on to this letter in agreement that there was so many companies trying to help them that it became overwhelming, that they really wanted to work with their communities. So we want to be sensitive to that as well. And we're not looking to bombard the schools with unproven solutions to things that may or may not really have an impact. So what we're really going to do is try to focus on the things that we will think will provide them the greatest impact. Now that was in the US, but I think that all of these things are common anywhere in the world to education, and they bring these issues. The need for physical distancing, the ability to provide remote learning, an issue that we call digital equity, or the ability for all the students to have equitable access to that learning if it goes digital, and then all of the compliance and risk and security that needs to underpin and connect all of this together. These are common no matter what country you're in. So looking at the first arrow marked on that survey chart, this was physical distancing. The recommendation is to reduce class sizes. We saw that in the announcement in India. We see that here in the States. This is common in most recommendations from most ministries of education or departments of education in your country. And the ways that schools are tackling that are through spacing the classroom furniture out to help promote that physical distancing where it's possible, or eliminating the spaces where students might gather very closely together, like a computer lab where students often sit elbows to elbows. They're going to use that outdoor space and large public spaces in a campus that maybe they weren't using for instruction before, but only for large gatherings. Now they can use those to spread the kids out. And of course, where it's possible, one-to-one device deployments. That means one device for each student rather than sharing devices. We think we will be seeing an acceleration of those programs in order to make sure kids are not sharing and touching the same things together. You know, you see the use of PPE in the personal protective equipment like masks and shields in these images. So if you're protecting these kids from one another, you clearly don't want them all touching the same things. And thankfully at CommScope, we have a number of technologies that help support these, because if you think about it, one of the first things that can help would be going to a wireless access, as long as you're not all sitting closely to one another and you can spread out and move around. The second item on there where you saw the blue arrow was distance and online learning. Online learning is a way to allow for distance learning. It doesn't mean that all distance learning is online, but online provides you some unique opportunities that other methods may not. We're increasingly seeing this return to school be a hybrid approach, meaning some students will have face-to-face class time as well as online learning, a combination of these two things. This would allow for students to have that 30% attendance. Schools could phase early morning shift and later afternoon shift. Students come in only half the class or a third of the class at a time. We also see the use of video conferencing growing. For those of you in business, we've probably spent much too much time on video chat and video conferencing as a result of this. Well, schools are using these tools as well. But that kind of experience requires a better connectivity, faster and a better quality of connection. We also see an increased adoption of cloud curriculum and collaboration tools, things like Google Apps or Microsoft Office 365. These are online cloud-based tools, but also Blackboard, Campus, My Campus. These are learning management systems are also cloud hosted. We see an increase in those as well. We also know that to do that, you each have to have a device, and this is where we will see a problem that keeps coming back up. Without having a device for each student, this becomes very difficult. And of course, you have to secure and provide policy on those devices to make sure it's a safe learning environment. And you know, I want to point out a couple of these pictures here that I found really interesting. In the top right, you see an art teacher teaching remotely. It seems very foreign, but we're seeing this increasingly. My daughter is taking watercolor painting via this video type of presentation. And it turns out this is one of her favorite classes now. In the bottom left, this was a girl who was taking physical education via a remote learning. This school was asked their students to videotape themselves doing some acceptable physical education, and then to turn that video and do some video production, add a voiceover narration, describe and add text over that video to say what they were doing and for how long, and then to submit that. This is phenomenon-based learning. In other words, learning multiple skills and talents through using through other experiences. And then we've all seen what seems so strange to us, but the remote graduation programs. The last one that is the biggest challenge ultimately is digital equity. We also know this as digital inclusion or the homework gap. The idea being that some students may have access while others don't, and this creates an enormous challenge. To do this, every student has to have access to at least one device. This can be a big challenge in a lot of places, but without it, you simply aren't able to do the remote learning and the distance learning that is online. But you can also see Wi-Fi as a service, perhaps. If you go to the cafe, you go down to the restaurants, they provide Wi-Fi, and it's possible that other forms of providing that connectivity would allow people to connect. Here in the States, you'll see a solution that Rich will describe with school buses. But we also partner with companies who provide Wi-Fi as a service on rail systems and in public areas to allow people to buy just a little bit of data and use their phone or what device they may have to connect, like Express Wi-Fi or Google Rail. We also see schools and businesses becoming those service providers. So if you have a connection to your school, perhaps you can use a wireless technology to distribute it around that school. There's a number of technologies that can help you do that as well. In the end, all of these challenges that I talked about and all of those strategies that we see the schools using to tackle them, well, they all come down to one thing. They're dependent on reliable and high-performing connectivity. In this graphic that I've presented here, what you're seeing is numbers in the millions of those who are not connected to the internet in each region. These numbers, while tremendously high, I leave feeling optimistic that we have the technologies to solve this and get everyone connected. Each country has its own technology standards and priorities, and CommScope has a portfolio that includes fiber and copper cabling, Wi-Fi, LTE, DOCSIS, DAS, and more. So those technologies that are relevant in your country and in your region, we provide those and we can help build solutions around it. So to close that connectivity, our solutions are used for building both public and private networks like I described in restaurants, also within the schools, and also public solutions from the Facebook Express Wi-Fi or Google Station, Google Rail. Those are great partnerships. And so you'll hear shortly here in a moment, we have some great customer stories to share as well. And that's where I'd like to turn it over to Rich to maybe provide you some more details of what that could look like.
Oh, thanks a lot, Eric. That was awesome. And if you have questions about anything Eric just presented, or if you'd like him to pull up those slides again later, please put it in the Q&A or chat windows so we can see that, and we'll be happy to answer those at the end. But in the meantime, I want to march ahead to talk about some of the solutions that are available now that are relevant for the primary and secondary education market to address many of the challenges that Eric just presented and pointed out. And then we'll wrap up with a few case studies. So for now, I want to talk a little bit about the 5 phases of digital learning transition. Now, I apologize, it's very hard to read this, so I'll ask you to simply enjoy the look and feel of this, because it's trying to convey to you that there are multiple phases or multiple stages through which schools are transitioning to digital learning. And they mostly are, and this is pretty much happening all around the world. According to our research in the US, 58% of schools say they're in this third phase, this middle phase of student-centric learning. Be curious where you think your schools are, and I'll define what they are real quick. Phase 1 is just lab-centric learning, where the learning happens at the edge of the classroom, typically on a wired desktop. This could be for gaming, this could be for 3D printing, this could be virtual reality stations, any number of things where a desktop makes more sense and the solution may be more cost prohibitive that you can't have every student use it. In phase 2, we have the traditional teacher-centric classroom. This is the one most of us grew up with, where there is a teacher in the front and rows and rows of students looking up. And the teacher may have a laptop and an overhead projector, but the students traditionally have paper and pencil and textbooks. This is the more teacher-centric learning. Still, about a quarter of the schools we surveyed said they were still in this phase, or phase 2. Phase 3 is student-centric learning. Excuse me. And in this one, this is more collaborative work groups, flexible classroom spaces. The idea now the students are in small work groups, social groups, where they can share ideas, maybe on one large screen. and the teacher is more of a guide going from group to group to group and guiding the learning that is going on. There's also remote learning at this point where students are expected to be able to do some homework, of digital curriculum homework while at home, meaning they have some access to a device and broadband at home. Phase 4 is community-based learning, and this is a combination of things. This is, can I have access to broadband for digital curriculum learning out in the community, but it also says, as a community, we're sharing thoughts and ideas. So a subject matter expert could give a guest speech from anywhere. It could be an astronaut, it could be a nurse, it could be a policeman, it could be anyone who's going to give a talk to a school, maybe over some video collaboration tool like FaceTime or Skype or WeChat even, right? So that's the idea behind community. So at this point, we're still having traditional classrooms, but the walls are coming down a little bit to include more people. We're also starting to see the move from traditional sports to esports in this community approach. By phase 5, we're talking about virtual classrooms, right? So this is the idea that the teacher can be anywhere, the students can be anywhere, and logically they attach to each other in a group that forms a class. And in this mode, you must have reliable connectivity available to you everywhere, home, school, anywhere in the community, et cetera. And that you're able to have this communication and collaboration with connectivity available to you wherever you go. It could be any number of different types of infrastructure to enable that. The interesting thing about these 5 phases is that while most schools are at phase 2 or 3, we seem to have just jumped over everything and landed at phase 5 because of this pandemic. Suddenly, the teacher must be at home, the students must be at home. We have to have these distance learning sessions, ready or not. And there's 2 areas of issue here. One, we may not have the academic software ready for distance learning at scale, right? So that it is a good experience that is engaging to the students and useful and helpful for the teachers. And we may not have the infrastructure in place for reliable connectivity so every student can attend this session and every teacher can teach this session. And if you don't have the reliable connectivity, you're going to have a bad experience or no experience. So if the software, if the curriculum isn't ready, it's a poor experience. If the infrastructure or the network isn't ready, you're going to have a poor experience or no experience. So jumping to phase 5 is a tremendous risk. And I think we've all been experiencing this, right? And this is why there's been such a sudden demand for new solutions for distance learning. All right, let's march ahead here. Connectivity at this point is in high demand, right? So distance learning, as I just mentioned, because of the fact that Eric just presented the statistics on schools shutting down nationwide, the number of schools shutting down, students impacted, 80% of learners impacted. So what can we do? Schools are asking us every day, and our reseller or channel partners are asking us every day, what can we do today, right now? How can we help? Right? What can we do to help get one more student connected to get their work done? How can we help one more teacher get connected to get that lesson done today? Often, this is done through outdoor coverage. This is the idea that, look, if I can't connect you at home, then I'll still ask you to somehow get to the connectivity. And that could be at a school, maybe outdoor, right? Not in the school, it's closed, but in the parking lot or in a green space near the school where I can put outdoor coverage, or in a nearby library where you're used to coming, but the library is closed for public safety reasons. But as long as you get to the parking lot, I can give you outdoor coverage and you can connect. So is this a good long-term solution? No, right? We don't believe so. Our customers are telling us it's not, but it's something they can do right away. It takes very little planning. It takes very little money. It has a tremendous immediate benefit. And so we're seeing a tremendous amount of interest in outdoor coverage solutions to enable distance learning. Now, beyond that, looking a little bit further on, what can we do to better plan, right? We didn't have the option to plan too much in advance. Nobody expected a pandemic to be upon us. And so we may have had projects on hold, or they may have been in different areas of progress, but now we need to rethink our priorities. Maybe we thought our priority was remodeling a building, but now we think our priority is distance learning video distribution. Maybe we thought our priority was indoor access points, but now our priority is outdoor Wi-Fi access points. So we need to do some preparation and planning. Now I realize for most of you, like you have to start the school year. It's time to go. Now there are exceptions, right? So Eric presented that some schools are going a little bit at a time, and so maybe this planning while implementing is an option. And for some, we're just not going to reopen until it's safe to reopen, in which case now is the time to plan your updates and your upgrades. And if you've had to open your doors and you're bringing the students in now, it's going to be lesson learned, right? It's going to be a combination of how do I support distance learning in case there is a second wave or in case there's a decision to stagger classes. But we'll also learn about, now that I have different formatted of classes, I have to route the students differently through the school. I may have to do more outdoor-based learning, as Eric mentioned. So my planning might be happening as we go, right? And then finally, budget planning is always a concern of where's the money come from. When economies are pulled back, we're officially in a recession here in the United States now due to this forced economic stoppage. And that has impacted government budgets, state budgets, city budgets, and those are the budgets that fund the schools. And so now the schools are having budget issues, so how can they afford all of this equipment? So that's a discussion that we would like to have, and we'd like our partners to have with you as well as you reevaluate your needs and priorities. Now, a year ago, we were happy to talk about reliable classroom connections. We were happy to talk about how many Wi-Fi access points does it take to cover a school, the benefits of Wi-Fi 6 over Wi-Fi 5. We even talked about vape detection and anti-bullying technology, which is very, very prevalent in the United States and in some other areas where we care very much about the health and wellness of our students and the rise of this new, we called it an epidemic. Our Surgeon General, our chief medical doctor in the United States government said this is a epidemic that needs to be addressed, not only because it's impacting students' health, but actually, if you think about it, it creates an underlying condition and vulnerability for students who might catch the coronavirus because their lungs are weaker. Regardless of that, we're in a new world now where we need new solutions in addition to these other solutions. So now we're looking at community connectivity. And mindful of digital equity, as Eric pointed out, right? Not just community connectivity for some, but to try to do it for everyone. It doesn't help for a school to say we're going to allow half our students to learn from home. We want all our students to be able to learn from home. But we also need the teachers to work from home. And so teleworker connectivity and staff connectivity and administrative connectivity, ministries of education need to work from home. I mentioned outdoor coverage before, and so whether that's a parking lot, or whether that's an entire smart city, which is whole neighborhoods covered or lit up in Wi-Fi or other technologies, those are solutions that we should talk about. How do we power those devices? So if I'm going to put access points in places I've never put them, and I need to put them in sides of buildings and on tops of poles and on billboards and things like that, how am I going to get power to them to run them? Am I going to have a solar panel connected to it? Am I going to have a hybrid fiber cable where I have a fiber cable and a power cable wrapped together and pulled out to it to get longer distance coverage? Or am I within range of, say, a PoE injector or a PoE switch? So those are the sort of practical considerations from putting outdoor coverage. Eric mentioned the need for more devices because we don't want the students sharing devices because of the risk to public health. Well, we need to secure those devices and make sure that there's secure connections and that students are protected from harmful internet content. So it's not enough to just provide devices, we need to secure them as well. And then finally, when the schools are closed or when their campus is closed, how do we know that it is safe and there's no one in there? Or conversely, if there are people there, are that they're obeying social distancing guidelines. So securing campus perimeters, monitoring the use of the campus is becoming a new requested solution as well. Now, I want to simplify the use cases for the purpose of this webinar into just 3 categories. Number 1 is the parking lot case, right? So just outdoor coverage. It's huge demand, as I said, because it's something you can go do right now with very little planning and with whatever budget you have. In the middle is something that a bit near and dear to my heart. We're seeing this new approach coming up, school bus Wi-Fi. And school bus Wi-Fi says, can I connect a neighborhood? So this is community-based connectivity by leveraging existing school buses. And then finally, school network preparedness. The idea of what can I do to better prepare to serve my students while preserving the public health. So some examples of what we've been talking about up till now: schools distributing devices, right, and doing so in a healthy way that that allows the kids to get connected. We're seeing donations coming in, lots of different devices. We probably won't have the luxury as schools to have one standard device, because we just need more devices. And if people are donating Microsoft devices, then we'll take them. And if they're donating Google Chromebooks, we'll take them, right? But we have to make them work, and we have to make them secure. Outdoor coverage can be in areas like a public library. Eric has been talking about this term drive-fi, right? So it's like drive-in Wi-Fi, which is becoming more and more interesting and available across our nation. And it's a very simple idea that you can pull into a parking lot, sit there, connect with reliable broadband delivery, and submit your homework and download your next day's homework. It probably doesn't take very long. You're in, you're out, and more importantly, you stay in your car and stay protected from the virus, right? So that's why this is so popular right now. Same idea, different name, Park and Learn, but the idea of coming into a school parking lot and having outdoor coverage so that you can connect your Chromebook or connect your laptop or connect your tablet or even connect your phone. Same idea. If we can do this, at least students and teachers can get some lessons done if the schools are closed or when the schools are closed. So this is one of those things that you can do very quickly, very easily, and of course we're happy to help do this and with our partners. Now I want to talk about the school bus Wi-Fi. Now, whether you have a yellow school bus or whether you have a van or some other vehicle that is owned and something you can touch for your school or for your district or for your institution, that's all that matters. The idea is that that vehicle can be equipped with an access point that has both Wi-Fi to connect to the devices as well as LTE or cellular backhaul to connect to the internet, and from there, if it's a managed access point, back to your wireless controller. So it acts as if it's part of your school, right? And so the idea here is we have something that you can put into a bus with Wi-Fi and LTE backhaul, and we can make it even more powerful by putting our traditional sectorized outdoor APs connected to it so that we can extend the range. And now you can move your bus within our neighborhood and extend the range. And I'll show you what that looks like, right? So here's an example of what we would call a trailer park, but basically small homes in a neighborhood where they don't have a lot of reliable access to broadband. They don't have families with lots of desktops and Apple computers and whatnot, right? They don't have the means to do that. They don't have the money for that. So here the school just parks the bus in that neighborhood and allows everyone within range of the signal from that bus to connect and do their homework. So a very simple example of what that might look like. Now, have we done this ourselves? Yes. We've been doing this since March of this year, really more impactfully than we have in the past. And here you see some outdoor APs mounted onto the school bus, in this case on the side of the bus. And a very happy school district that was able to connect their kids. And the idea is that we just drive this bus out into the neighborhood. You could park it overnight. You could leave it in a certain neighborhood for a few hours a day and simply publish that schedule and a map of where the bus is going to be on the website so everybody knows what to expect and when to be there. Or it could drive its normal route and everybody just walks close enough to the bus to get connected, but not so close to be within too close physical proximity to each other. So that's school bus Wi-Fi. Now, I'm going to provide a couple slides here that simply summarize a number of things for us. I won't spend all this time talking about it because you'll get copies of these slides. So don't feel like feel free to screenshot this if you like, but the idea is that we have these distance learning solutions from CommScope in our Ruckus product portfolio that is specifically helpful for primary, secondary education. It may help other industries as well, but for today's discussion, it's very helpful for connecting students with outdoor APs, with securing a campus to make sure that lockdown is maintained so that you can see what's going on and make sure nobody's getting in. We can enable one-to-one learning with our Wi-Fi 6 access points, which is the latest Wi-Fi standard. It is the highest capacity, most reliable connectivity solution available. By the way, Ruckus has the first access point that was Wi-Fi 6 certified and is used by the standards bodies in the test bed. So every device from now on that claims to be Wi-Fi 6 certified has been tested on the Ruckus access point. So I just want to mention that real quick. Of course, we also have structured cabling and Ethernet switching to enable that one-to-one learning as well. For distance learning solutions for digital equity, we have our outdoor APs. We have cloud capability so that you can manage your network remotely. So if it's your job to make sure that the network is always running, but you can't be there, you have to work from home. So things like a cloud-based approach put the power of network management in the palm of your hand. And then we mentioned our school bus Wi-Fi solution. Our M510 is our access point product that enables that. It's Wi-Fi to the device and cellular back to the internet. And then for securing devices, we have our Cloud Path software. So you can connect donated devices as well as school devices and secure those connections with identity to know that you're getting a secure connection and not allowing students to see things they're not supposed to see. And basically, this enables you to provide compliance. So if you have compliance issues for security, this is one of the ways you can address it. Now, we deliver all these solutions with a number of products. Again, I won't go into all those products today because it takes a bunch of time, but feel free to screenshot and you will get these slides. I mentioned Cloud Path for onboarding and securing devices and securing connections for students. Smart Zone is our management solution. We have Unleashed for access points that just work by themselves with the controller code built in. We also have Cloud Managed Networks for wired and wireless products. And then we have Standalone Smart Zone for the larger deployments, and I'll get to a couple examples of those in a minute. We have the structured cabling from our CommScope parents, copper and fiber solutions, powered fiber, cable management, et cetera. And we have ICX switches from the Brocade and Foundry days, now part of the Ruckus ICX switch line. So fanless switches for classrooms, highly scalable, low power switches, cloud managed. And of course, we have the best access points in the business from Ruckus networks, including the Wi-Fi 6 access points that I mentioned. So let me jump ahead now, talk a little bit in the 20 minutes or so that we have left about some examples. So earlier this year, and honestly, it feels like a lifetime ago, but believe it or not, in February, I was lucky enough to find myself in India visiting with our salespeople and our partners, visiting customers in primary, secondary, and higher education. This was called our Smart Campus Tour. I went to a variety of schools, and I give a couple examples here. So on the right, in the lower right, in a very challenged neighborhood, I saw the cows and the bulls walking through the poor streets and the poor neighborhoods. And then here, circled in red, is a flag proudly announcing a brand new middle school opening up. Admissions open, please apply to the school. So for them, they really just need basic connectivity to enable probably phase 2 or phase 3 of digital learning, just getting the teacher connected so the students can learn. It's probably good enough for them. And now maybe some outdoor access points as well. Whereas this giant school bus here, this was Sri Ram School in Mumbai, 200 Ruckus access points. They're in the process of migrating to Wi-Fi 6. They are currently testing an M510 on their buses for video streaming so that they know what's going on their bus at all times. They have very affluent parents who have good earnings, and it's a private school, and they can afford to put very good equipment in there and run their own buses. Down below on the left, this is visiting a partner who offered some amazing classroom technology to schools like Sri Ram. Virtual classroom solutions on the left, video collaboration solutions in the middle there. So again, big on video, and not that we knew it at the time, but literally weeks after I was there, now those solutions are incredibly relevant as we're going to rely more and more on video collaboration software and virtual classrooms. So it was an amazing time to visit, and I'm expecting that these types of distance learning solutions, while we talk about it in the U.S. all the time, are going to become more and more relevant in India and in these other locations that I'm going to talk about, such as South Korea, where we have a deployment in the south of South Korea, right, on the southern border. 300 smart schools being deployed, Wi-Fi 5 today, 4,300 access points, but they're currently in the middle of a project to upgrade their access points on future schools to Wi-Fi 6. It's the same idea that here you are with the teacher in the front, with the projector or the smart board, the students listening and paying attention. Their laptops are closed here, but they might as well. You can imagine that the class will change over time, and there'll be more screen time for digital curriculum delivery. So they're in the midst of their smart school transition. Now, I understand from our team that there really aren't yellow school buses in South Korea, but
I don't know if we lost audio or if it's just me. Rich, can you confirm?
Sorry, just give us a minute. Yep, we seem to be working now. Please go ahead.
Great. So maybe it's just Rich that we lost, your audio. You might want to check if you're on mute. We'll give him a moment. In the case that we lost Rich altogether, this is a great example of why connectivity is so important, right? A student who loses their connectivity in the middle of their learning day is going to have an experience just like this. And these things happen, right? So I'll do my best here to try to pick up. The example here that Rich was presenting is on the Ministry of Education in New Zealand with 2,500 schools that were connected. This is a pretty significant opportunity that we participated in here. Schools are really looking for the ability to make sure that they have great, reliable access available in every classroom. And what was interesting to us was that when they ran their when they put out their requirements, some of the key things that they were looking for was to enable access in all their classrooms, and in particular with video, right? So they, like most people, are leveraging video for learning. I like to tell people that I rewired my home electrical system, my main electrical system in my home, by watching a YouTube video, right? So the first place we go to learn something, typically a video. So no different, Ministry of Education in New Zealand decided to prioritize that in their testing, as well as deploy half as many access points. So one wireless access point to cover 2 classrooms. And this was where the Ruckus Networks Wi-Fi solution really shines. We have far better connectivity, and we can deliver that video with some patented technology better than any of the other competitors who participated in the tender.
Hey, so, Eric, can you hear me now?
Hey, you're back. Welcome back.
Oh, okay, sorry, I have no idea what happened there, but that's life working from home.
That's right.
Thank you for picking that up. Why don't you keep going, and I'll jump in as needed.
So what we anticipate and what we're hearing from our schools is what should I be doing, right? And so we wanted to provide some thoughts around what you can look at doing in the short term and the near term and long term. And right now, it's, from the most part, while schools had their students at home, they wanted to know, what can I do to help my school right now when my students were unable to come to class into the campus and maybe have challenges connecting at home. And so 2 areas that we would recommend looking at were outdoor coverage, as I talked about in the beginning. That can be in the parking lots, in your library. Maybe you have some athletic fields nearby where you have connectivity to. Any of those spaces, consider those for coverage and connectivity, right? We have fantastic Wi-Fi 6 outdoor access points. So the very latest technology, which means great capacity and great performance. And then that mobile hotspot concept, right? Whether it's a yellow school bus or it's a van, it's one of your facility vehicles, that kind of connectivity so that students can connect in those areas where they otherwise wouldn't. Now, I've had people ask, how is that connecting? And again, just to put a point on it, the Wi-Fi that's being provided, the backhaul is connecting to your local cellular network. So it's an LTE connection. So if there's a cell signal, it connects to this Wi-Fi access point, that then can allow other devices to connect. And those other devices are students who maybe don't have or can't afford a data plan. The near term, how can I best prepare our networks as schools reopen? We see that schools are reopening. There's many more devices showing up on campus. Those devices are going to need more capacity. So it's a great time to plan your upgrades, update your wired and wireless firmware and software. So while you don't have students there that this will impact and you don't have downtime, you can perform those upgrades. You can migrate to the cloud. This is a great time to test cloud services. So when you're off campus, you don't want to be on campus doing management in one of the network closets. Having that ability to remotely access that network is a great value. Allows you to create new networks even on the fly remotely and make sure that everything is up and running. In the long term, what are you looking forward to for your 2021 budget? Right? So what are you going to do to grow that campus, to solve some of these challenges that you're looking forward to? You should start considering which government funding programs you can use. Each country has some different stimulus, some different funding mechanisms available. There isn't one answer we can give you all, but it's a perfect time, right, to look at what funding will be available for you and start planning how you're going to tackle some of those challenges. If it's been more than 3 years since you upgraded your network, it's a great time to look at that. Standards change fairly quickly, in particular with Wi-Fi. All the wireless standards have dramatically improved. Each generation offers you many times over increased coverage, capacity, and performance. And Rich, I'll let you take this last slide.
All right. So now that you've heard the trends impacting us and the solutions available to us, what should you do next? Well, we would encourage you to work with your reseller partner and let them help you. We do not feel that we want to interrupt anyone who is in the midst of dealing with the challenges brought about by this pandemic. As Eric presented earlier, when most schools are worried about soap and masks and physical spacing and whatnot, we want you to take care of what you need to take care of. But we're here and our partners are here. And so if you do have questions, you do have needs that we can help you with, we would love to do that. One way that we can help you get information are events, online events like this one. And we would encourage you to look for more events like this one where you can pick up some shared learning. You might be able to do a product demo or a trial working with one of our partners or one of our product experts. So please do take advantage of those online events if you cannot do face-to-face. For cloud trial, so this one I think is probably the best call to action of all. So using a free cloud trial application, and we can give you a link if you raise your hand and ask for it. You can get an access point sent to you or brought to you if that's an option, and it will include 2 free months use of our cloud software to manage it, as well as 2 free months of access point support, as well as 2 free months of our new Ruckus Analytics, which is our proactive network health monitor management solution that uses machine learning and artificial intelligence to understand how your network is being used on a day-to-day basis over time. It learns your network, and then it identifies when something is slightly off or something's broken or something's wrong. So it'll even propose fixes to it proactively and say, if you do this, it will fix your network. So it's an amazing tool. It's brand new. We just launched it. So cloud gives you all of this. So you'll get to try a Wi-Fi 6 access point for 2 months with support with the Ruckus Analytics. So I would encourage everyone to do that if you could. And you could even do it with an outdoor access point. So if you really want to be clever, you could get an outdoor access point that's Wi-Fi 6, that's in the cloud, and get it for 2 months and try the Ruckus Analytics and get everything covered with one effort. Now, if you're worried about securing those student connections and onboarding different types of devices, then I would encourage you to ask for a free CloudPath demo or trial. We can do that too. All these things are in software. And so over a WebEx, over a phone call, you can see very clearly how this works. You could even remotely drive the conversation and click on the buttons yourself and try it for yourself. So CloudPath, very simple way to allow students to just 3 clicks and they're connected and up and running, and they don't need to log into your network again, and we'll have secure connectivity. Finally, I just want to mention we have a promotion going on right now. So if you are a Ruckus customer in particular, if you have Ruckus access points, switches, or controllers, we've added 3 months of free support to your active contracts. And that's automatically, you didn't have to do anything. That's just part of the COVID relief program to try to do something to help you in this time. But between now and June 30th still, if those contracts have lapsed, have expired, we'll still support you and take your support calls. If you go ahead and renew those contracts, we will add 3 months to those. So if you renew for 12 months, you'll get 15 months. If you review for 24 months, you'll get 27 months. And if you purchase new contracts, let's say you buy new equipment and you purchase new contracts, then if you do it by June 30th, we will add 3 months of free support in addition to whatever the term of that support contract was. So it's a very powerful promotion going on right now for support, because we know for most schools, you're looking to save here and there. Support is one of those areas that you tend to look at to save money, but you still need the support capability. You want to be able to call tech support. So that's why we want to offer that bit of free trial. So with that, I will turn it back over to our illustrious team to see if there's any questions that have come in that we can help answer in the time remaining.
I'm just going to push them up to the screen.
Yeah.
All right. Rich, I'll read this and we'll see who's going to answer it. I'm Dr. Murugan, Chief Scientist, Central Road Research Institute, New Delhi, India. My question pertains to the online learning for schools and colleges during the ongoing pandemic. It is mentioned by your self-video slide number 14 that the number of unconnected audiences in South Asian region is 1,012, which is very high. In the case of school students, this facility is available largely to the students of private schools only and not to the students of government schools. Kindly elaborate. So on slide 14, I imagine that may have been my closing slide, Rich, that has the statistic taken. So this number 1,012, that's in the millions, and that actually represents number of individuals, not students specifically, right? So these are families and family members of the public who are not connected. So just to elaborate or to provide some detail, that includes the entire population, not just students. So it's great to hear that you have a facility that's available to the students of private schools, that you make it available to them during the pandemic, and I think that's fantastic. But not to the students of government schools, which is of interest as well. I'm not sure why that might be, but in the end, we believe all students are getting connectivity, and perhaps it's possible that you can look at the Research Institute as a point of access for all students.
Mm-hmm.
this is a second part from the same person.
I do not see it. Okay. Similarly, in the case of college students, the scenario is much more worse, as many students hail from rural areas wherein the internet connection is very poor. How to get over this situation? So in rural areas, and generally speaking, there's going to be wireless presents a particularly good option, but there are many pieces to get the wireless extended out into that rural area. We have LTE solutions, so cellular solutions, but we also have private LTE solutions. This means a university, as you described earlier, or a private organization who does have network connectivity could use a private LTE radio to extend that connectivity out into more rural areas. It will always come down to design, and there may always be challenges, but given the availability of technologies like fiber and these private LTE services, as well as then Wi-Fi down for the last link of that network, there are many different options to do that, but it will take some careful design and planning. Rich, do you want to add to that?
Sure. So this is a great question, and honestly, we get this from many across the U.S. They asked us this question last week. Eric and I got this question from someone in Australia, and I think the answer is going to vary based on local condition and local capability. But broadly speaking, I agree with everything Eric just said, which is you'd want to have wireless connectivity to those rural residents. The question is, what is that wireless backhaul technology going to be, and how are you going to enable it? Are you going to enable it broadly across the whole area, or are you going to enable it in a certain location close enough that they could get to it? We talked about libraries and school parking lots. We have a colleague who, in her very rural area, she lives on a lake in the middle of nowhere, but she managed to put outdoor access points in a community center connected to the internet on a cellular backhaul through a wireless internet service provider, and now makes it available to her entire community as a connectivity hub. It's not a lot. Maybe dozens of people can connect at once, but that's dozens who couldn't connect at all before. And so it may be something like that becomes a viable solution for you. I don't know. I think the private LTE solution is the one that's getting a lot of attention here in the States because the 3.5 gig frequency band is already open and approved by the FCC for us to use. And so we're building out solutions for that one where we could cover, let's say, a mile radius with broadband connectivity and put some sort of gateways in everyone's homes. So that's another option. There are several different ways to do this. The other was a vehicle. We talked about driving a vehicle out into that rural area and parking it and letting people connect to it overnight. That's another option. So I don't think there's one good answer, but there are a number of possible answers. Very good question.
Okay, so in the sake of time, we do have a lot of remaining questions unanswered that we've received. So what we will do is we'll have Rich and Eric review the questions and come back with some answers and put this into our closing email with a copy of the slide deck as well as the webinar recording. So just a reminder to complete the event survey once we email this out to you for your chance to win one of the $25 Amazon gift cards. Thank you, Eric and Rich, for your time today. And thanks to everyone that's joined. We hope to speak to you all again soon. Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you, everybody.